So let us start. Good morning, everyone. Let us start our new lesson, India's foreign policy. Now, in last chapter, we have already studied about the nature and of the Cold War. Then, what were the effects of the different wars, First World War, Second World War, and the Cold War on the world. Okay, and which are the issues introduced there. Okay, now in this chapter we are going to study about what is the meaning of the foreign policy, which are the factors which put an impact or affect the foreign policy, and what is the nature of the foreign policy. These 3 points we are going to study in this chapter. So let us start with the foreign policy. Okay, now we have already done in a short what is a foreign policy, but I want to give a detailed information. What is a foreign policy? Now we all know that in the world, no one is independent. Not a single country is totally independent. They are somehow dependent on others. Okay, so no country is self-dependent in different terms. So there is a need to mutual interdependence in the international system. Now, interdependence should be benefited to few countries only. And effort should be made to make a nation with a lots of benefits. So each country has to decide the nation with which it should be friendly and which bloc. Now, what is a bloc? Now we have already discussed there some organizations has been made in which different countries come together and they have formed their group. So these groups are called as bloc. Okay, so those who work together for the economic and political development. So, in which block they want to participate, what should be their position, this should be properly decided. Then only we can make a proper foreign policy. Okay, so in short, we can say a theoretical framework in which different decisions are taken is called foreign policy. Okay, what is a foreign policy? Foreign policy is the theoretical framework in which different decisions about anything for uh, to whom to talk and what should be done, then what relation between the international nations. Foreign policy plays a very important role. So it is very important each and every nation should have their own foreign policy. Now, national interest. We have briefly understood what is the foreign policy. Okay, what is a foreign policy? It talks about different disciplines we should take into consideration while making any decision or any relation with the other country. But when we are making the foreign policy, it is very important that we should take into consideration the national interest too. Okay, without taking national interest into consideration, we are not able to make a proper foreign policy. Okay, now what is the role of the national interest? Or what is the role of the national interest in consideration with the foreign policy? National interest foster it grows the foreign policy. So it is very important to understand, before understand foreign policy, we should understand what is national interest is. Now, what is a national interest? National interest uh, means the independence and sovereignty. Now, what is a sovereignty? Supreme authority to rule. Okay, so national interest talks about something which is independent and sovereignty of our country can be safeguarded. Okay, means whenever we are making relation with some other countries, so that time we should be that much enough that we should protect our independence. Okay, so national interest not only includes this, but it also includes to achieve the economic development, because without economic development also we cannot stand in the world. Okay, so whenever we are taking decisions, so it should be careful thought what is beneficial for our country, what is good for our country, and that according to that only we should make the different policies. Okay, if we making any policy which can create a problem in our society, in our country, so it is not helping to our national interest. So whenever we are making any foreign policy, it is very important we should take into consideration the national interest too. Okay, so now national interest has two criteria. The first is the defense and the second is the economic development. Now, we all know it is very important that we should have a strong military power, then only we are able to safeguard ourselves. Okay, and it should be independent. So it now why defense is important? To keep ourselves independent, to secure our sovereignty and integrity. Okay, if we don't have a powerful defense system, so anybody can attack on us. Okay, you can take the example of China that they have attacked us some days before. So because our defense system was strong, so we are able to tackle them. Okay, so it is not affected to our national interest. But if we are not capable in a defense, so it can attack and it can uh, capture our one of the part. Okay, so this is very important for the national interest. Okay, now the second, economic development. Now economic development is also important, because if a nation is economically weak, so it is not able to maintain its independence, because they have to always dependent on other. Okay, so it is very important that we should have a powerful defense system and we have a strong economy, that only we are able to uh, complete our criteria for the national interest, and which is very important for the foreign policy. I hope all my students have understood. Okay, now let us do the comparison of the national interest and foreign policy. Okay, now foreign policy drawn for what purpose? Take care for the national interest of defense and economic development. And what is the economic development? Sorry, what is a national interest? National interest is something which considered to be goal and foreign policy to achieve whatever the goal we have already made. So for that uh, goal, we have to achieve that goal, and for that purpose whatever we are doing, that is called as national interest. Okay, foreign policy is important to take care, to foster of our national interest, and national interest is very important because whatever the goal we have, the goal we have already said that we have to achieve that goal. for that we need to make a proper things. Okay, now what happened, the goals of the nation has been changing every time. We have already discussed the different 5-year plans in our history. Okay, there are different goals have been set in different 5-year plans, and we're trying to achieve that goal. The goals are dependent on the condition of the society. So as the goals are changing, so it is very important that national interest should also change. So national interest change according to the goals are changing into the society. So as the national interest is changing, in the same way the foreign policy is also changing. Okay, so it is a cycle. Society changes its goal. So because of that, so national interest also changes, and as the national interest is changing, so foreign policy is also changing. Is that clear to everyone? Okay. So we can say foreign policy is dynamic in nature. That is, keep on changing. Now let us discuss factors which can affect, which can influence the foreign policy. Okay, now first, very important, geographical location. Now we have already seen different maps, globes. Now we already know the difference between the nations. Some nations have, like China, they have long coastal area. Sorry, not China. Sorry, China has a long land area. Then Japan has a coastal area. India has the peninsula. The Indian peninsula has a coastal area, and the northern parts has the Himalayan mountains. Like this, the different nations have different geographical lines. Okay, some are very far from different countries, and some are neighboring countries. Understood? For example, we have our neighbors, for example, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar. All these are our neighboring nations. Okay, so according to that, there are different resources are also available. Na? Understood? Some nations are with plenty of crude oil. We can take the example of Middle East country. Some nation are with blessed by God with lots of agriculture. That is our India. We can take an example. So according to the geographical location, they have different natural resources. Okay, so we can take the sum of all these things, that is population. Okay, how much population one nation has. Okay, then after that, we take coastline, the coastal area. Then we can take the topography. Now, what do you mean by topography? Topography is something which is deals with artificial and natural physical features. Okay, now we have already different mountainous region, then plateau, land, and these are all natural. Then we make some artificial thing. This is called as topography. Then availability of the natural resources. All these must be taken into consideration while making the foreign policy. Is that clear? Okay. Now the next is political system. Now we have in our India there is a democratic political system. So it has a very important role by parliament. Okay, parliament is very important for taking any decisions. So whenever some policies are going to be made, so that time discussion should be uh, take place in the parliament. So during that opposition party, we already know there is a ruling party and opposition party. Those who come into the power, they become a ruling party, and other parties, other national parties are work as a opposition parties. So the opposition party, what is the role of the opposition party? They regulate the foreign policy by raising questions about the same. Regulate in the sense they try to analyze the foreign policy, whatever the foreign policy the ruling party has made. They ask different questions and they try to analyze that foreign policy. They make others to understand, they make themselves to understand what does it made and how it can change the society. So it is very important that the political system should work properly. Now what happened if there is a changes took place in our nation, it also affect the neighboring country. For example, we take example of Sri Lanka. If there is some changes took place in the Sri Lanka, that will also affect the Tamil Nadu, right? If some changes took place in Pakistan, that will affect Punjab and Gujarat, Rajasthan, as they are sharing border with the Pakistan. Am I right? So the neighboring nations also affect the constituent states. So whenever we are making some foreign policy, that should be made in by taking consideration of all these neighboring nation too. Is that clear to everyone? Now the next is the economy. Now in your textbook, beta, the foreign spelling is given wrong on page number 66. The first point, it is given GH, it should be GM. Now economic condition is very important in modern times. Okay, because it plays a very important role to decide foreign policy. Now foreign policy is shaped on the basis of the need to establish economic relations with other countries in terms of import, export, participation in the world trade, which can strengthen the country. Is that clear? For example, we will make a relation with nation according to their things, what they are going to be produced and how much we need that thing in our nation. Okay, as we have collaboration with different nations, we have now you can take example of Geo company. Okay, which may according to the foreign policy of India, it made a relation with the international market and it is trying to establish and flourish his industry in the India, the Reliance industry, the Geo industry, we can take example. Okay, now the second, whenever we are making foreign policy, we should take into consideration the issue of economic security, as it is as much as important the national security. Now, when a country will be considered as a powerful country, we have already discussed this factor that when a nation is economically strong, if a nation is not economically strong, it is always dependent on others. So it can, so any nation can take the advantage of that. Okay, now we can, why we against the different countries, those who want to attack on ourselves. Why? Because we have a strong economy. Okay, the China has trying to attack. I'm not supporting anyone, and I'm not against anyone, but I'm just taking an example. Okay, so uh, what happened when a country attacks on ourselves? So we try to take different uh, ammunitions from other nations. Okay, those who are making defense materials. So what happened, as we have lots of money with ourselves, so then only we can purchase it. Otherwise, if you're not economically strong, so it can create problem to take uh, decisions regarding how to choose that the basic necessity or defense. But as we are strong economically, so we can take any decision. Okay, so I hope students understood this much. Now, next is national leadership. Now, leadership is a very important. Okay, if there is no strong leadership, so the nation cannot make a strong foreign policy. Okay, so different leaders who made the foreign policy, who played an important role for making the foreign policy. First, our president, our honorable president, prime minister, foreign minister, who deals with the foreign affairs. Okay, then defense minister and finance minister and the home minister. So these are the some important person who come together and decide the foreign policy. Okay, why they are included? Because they all are important to make foreign policy. Defense minister will sit and because he know all about the defense, so then only he can give a proper decision what to be taken, proper advice. Okay, we can say. So the person, those who are here to do the discussion about taking which foreign policy should be good, they should maintain whatever the foreign policy have been implemented by them, that should have a continuity. Okay, now for example, the foreign policy made by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Okay, which foreign policy they have made, we have already discussed. After Cold War, which foreign policy he had made? I want from you with your hands better answer. We have discussed when there was a Cold War. That time, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru uh, accepted one important novel concept. What was that? Very good, Vaidehi. It was non-alignment. So, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru has been contributed the policy of non-alignment movement. Then after that, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee made a great deal with the Sino-Indian relations. Sino-Indian relation in the sense, Sino means Chinese. So Chinese-Indian relation. Now our Prime Minister is making some other foreign policy, as there is a lot of issues are happening with the Nepal and China. Understood? So as per the condition of the society, our leader decide which foreign policy should be taken into consideration. Okay, now if there is a war situation between two nations, the friendly relationship will not continue. The foreign policy will change according to that. Okay, is that clear to everyone? Now the next, last but not the least, the factor influencing the foreign policy is administrative factor. Okay, so now who are important, who all are involved in this? Ministry of External Affairs, Foreign Secretary, embassies in different countries, and diplomatic officers are important to in the administrative factor to create the foreign policy. Okay, national leader, what will the national leader will do? They will just decide what should be done and not, and after that the administrative factor will create the national foreign policy. Okay, embassies, every nation have different embassies. Whenever we have to travel somewhere else out of the nation, so we have to take visa. So that embassy which is there, for example, Pakistan has the Indian embassy, we have a Pakistan embassy, American embassy, other embassies. Okay, so they are just a link between the two nations who gives who take into consideration who should be enter into the nation and who should not. Okay, so now who are responsible for creating the foreign policy? This Ministry of External Affairs, Foreign Secretary, embassies in different countries, and diplomatic officers. These four things are very important to create the foreign policy. But who will take the decision that foreign policy should be implemented or not? Our Prime Minister, External Affairs, and administrative machinery. This helps to take the decision that whatever the foreign policy have been made, that should be taken, that should be implemented or not. Okay, now how they are going to implement it, or just they have made and they will implement? No, first they will make the foreign policy, then they will analyze, they will study, they will do a uh, deep study, they will analyze, they will take the advice from others, and then after that uh, this foreign policy will be implemented if there will be no problem for the national interest and defense. If the foreign policy is not appropriate, so it will analyze, and the changes will be made in that foreign policy, then after that it will be implemented.